Hello, and welcome back to another episode of 8-Bit Monsters Monster D&D. Nope, that's not how we do it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of 8-Bit Monsters Monster Deconstruction for D&D 5th Edition. That's better. So what are we looking at today for this week's episode? Well, today we're looking at the Orc Claw of Luthic. And the Orc Claw of Luthic can be found in Volo's Guide to Monsters on page 183. And you may be wondering to yourself, hey, Andrew, who are the Orc Claws of Luthic? Well, the Orc Claws of Luthic are actually followers of Luthic, and Luthic is the wife of Grumsh, and the paragon of maternity to all orcs. Continuing on, our Orc Claw of Luthic is a CR2 worth 450 XP, and when we look at Xanathar's Guide for Encounter Building, we're going to see that players can actually fight the Orc Claws of Luthic, or Orc Claws as I'm going to call them. Players can encounter the Orc Claws as group monsters with 6 second level players, 4 third level players, or 2 fourth level players. And on top of this being a group monster, players can actually encounter this Orc Claw as a solo monster for an epic encounter, and funny enough, it could take between 5 to 6 first level players or 4 second level players to encounter this monster on a solo basis. So we got a pretty interesting example here of fighting a couple of these Orc Claws as a group or fighting it on a solo basis. And it could prove to be quite the interesting encounter for a solo monster. Now, on top of that, our players can also solo this monster at level 5. Again, this is a CR2 rated monster, and our players have to be at least 5th level without any kind of magical equipment or weapons to be able to fight this monster on a 1-to-1 basis. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, let's jump into my favorite section, the TLDW, because most people are going to dip out right around now. So our Orc Claw is rated for a DCR 1/4. Man, low hit points. Let's talk about that in a little bit. Next, our Orc Claw has an OCR of 3 or 4. And then finally, when we combine all that, we're going to get an FCR of 2, which is great because it actually matches the printed value of 2 as well. So we're going to go through this and see why our Orc Claw has such a high OCR and such a low DCR. Moving on, we're going to take a look at the skills and traits. Now our Orc Claw is at such a low CR value that its proficiency bonus is only a +2. And this is pretty normal. Our monsters won't hit the next printed proficiency bonus until I think CR 4 or 5. I don't quite recall, I'd have to look at the chart. So our proficiency bonus of +2 is going to be added into our skills, which there are only a couple of, thankfully. Speaking of the skills, our Orc Claws will have Intimidation +2, which is a Charisma bonus +0 and the proficiency bonus, Medicine +4 of a Wisdom +2 bonus, and Survival +4, also a Wisdom +2 bonus. So none of these skills are actually experts, but they still gain the proficiency bonus for these Orc Claw matrons. Now, moving down into the traits section, we're going to take a look at our Orc Claw's, well, traits. The one trait that our Orc Claws have is aggressive, which is pretty common with all of our orcs. Now, this allows them to use a bonus action to make another move all the way up to an enemy that they can see. Due to the traits for aggressive, our Orc Claws are going to get a +2 DPR when we go into the OCR section. So we're going to have to remember that a little later on. And surprisingly enough, it's not a huge bonus and should kind of be on a sliding scale, in my opinion, when we get into higher rated monsters that are using aggressive. But they don't, and this is all that D&D gives monsters using the aggressive trait. So, you know, if we had a dragon somehow with the aggressive trait, that could be a little bit more dangerous than an orc at such a low level. So maybe aggressive is reserved for monsters with a lower CR value. Who knows? The other trait that our Orc Claw has is spellcasting. When we review the spellcasting list, we'll see that the only damaging spell or beneficial spell to our Orc Claws is Guiding Bolt. Everything else kind of is manipulative, or modifies or helps in some other way. So Guiding Bolt is going to be the only thing we're going to be taking a look at here. And we'll be using that information in the OCR similar to our previous monsters with spellcasting as well. Now that our skills and traits are out of the way, let's jump right into that DCR and see why it's rated at CR 1/4. Okay, our Orc Claw has nothing modifying the hit points here, so we're going to jump right into the effective hit points that it has so we can use it on the chart. And our Orc Claw has 45 hit points, rated from the 68 plus 18 hit dice. Now this is going to give our Orc Claw DCR of 1/4. Let's take a look at the armor class and see why this is. Our Orc Claw has nothing modifying the AC, so we're going to jump right into the effective AC at 14 and take a look at our chart. When we look at our chart for a DCR of 1/4, we're going to see that it has an expected rating of 13. This is great. It's only +1 over the expected because our Orc Claw has 14 for its AC. So there's going to be no shift at all to the DCR, and we're going to have a DCR of 1/4. Great, we have our DCR of 1/4. Let's move on to the OCR and see why I gave this a rating of 3 or 4. Alright, our Orc Claws have a multi-attack, and this is where things get a little interesting and why I suggest a 3 or 4 for the final OCR here. The Orc Claws can do 2 claw attacks normally at first, but then once the Orc Claw goes under half hit points, it then gets to attack 4 times with its claws. Now normally when we calculate our monsters, it's always from the first 3 rounds of combat, but because of this extra ability to do more attacks at half hit points, I decided to take a look at the OCR after the fact of it going under half hit points. So first let's take a look at the claws. The claws do an average of 6.5 damage coming from its 1d8 plus 2 attack dice. So our multi-attack before it goes into a half hit point rage is going to average out at 13 damage per round. Alright, let's take a look at multi-attack once it's under half hit points. Well, that's actually just going to double the multi-attack average since we're going from 2 attacks to 4 attacks. The Orc Claw then gets 26 average damage per round. Boy, that's a big jump. That's a pretty hefty jump. Not a big surprise as to why I decided to also look at the OCR once it hits half hit points. This Orc is going to be doing a lot of damage at this point. On top of that, the Orc gets the +2 damage per round from its aggressive trait. So our multi-attack is actually going to be doing 15 points of damage, and our multi-attack after half hit points is going to be doing 27 points of damage. Alright, so we have our multi-attacks out of the way, but what about Guiding Bolt from its spellcasting? Well, Guiding Bolt, because it can be used at 1st level and all the way up, and this is a monster that can cast at 3rd level, our Guiding Bolt can be used twice at 3rd level for 21 points of average damage. Again, because this is a spellcaster, I have a Google Sheet set up to show how much damage they can be doing beforehand. Before the Orc Claw hits its half health and starts going into what I like to consider a rage, the Orc Claw could or should be spamming Guiding Bolt the bunch of turns before it hits that half health. So we take a look at the Orc's Guiding Bolt at 2 level 3 casts and 1 level 2 cast, and this will average out to 21 points of damage per round. This is also including the damage buff per round from aggressiveness. This will put our Guiding Bolt into the OCR range of 3. Now after the Orc Claw hits half health, it actually has to go under half health, the multi-attacks will start doing more damage, and because of that, our multi-attack at 4 claw attacks will be hitting 28 average damage per round. This will put us into the OCR 4. Boy, already we're hitting high numbers again and low DCR numbers. Now, the effective attack bonus for our Orc Claw is going to be +4 for both spellcasting and melee attacks. There's nothing modifying our attack bonus, so we're just going to jump right into that effectiveness. Now, if we take a look at our chart here, we'll see that an OCR 3 is expected to have an attack bonus of +4 for ranged spell attacks and for melee attacks. Since the expected is +4 and our Orc Claw here has a +4 already, it's going to be equal, so there's going to be no shift at all, and our Guiding Bolts are going to be rated at OCR 3. Now, after the hit points drop below half, we're better off using the multi-attack for the 28 average damage. We'll see that in our chart, we'll see that the OCR 4 is expected to have an attack bonus of +5, which is only -1 under the effective attack bonus, and there's going to be no shift again because we need multiples of 2. When the Orc Claw starts to quote-unquote rage out and does more multi-attacks, the OCR 4 is going to stay at that because there's going to be no shift. We have an OCR 3 at first, and then once the Orc Claw hits half health, we'll have an OCR 4. Cool. We have our DCR and we have our OCR. let's take a look at the FCR and see what we have for its values. Alright, so first let's take a look at guiding bolts. Our DCR is going to be 1/4 plus an OCR of 3, which will equal out to 3.25, and then we'll average that out to 1.625. And because of rules of going to the closest CR rating, we're going to round this up to 2. And that is the final combat rating, which is also the printed version. Now what about when the Orc Claw hits half hit points? Well, we'll switch from guiding bolts and go into multi-attack. And there we have a DCR of 1/4 again, plus an OCR of 4, which equals 4.25. We'll average that out to 2.125. And due to rules for going to the closest CR again, we will round this one down to 2. Here we go again, we have the printed value of 2, although slightly higher than the final combat rating of 2 for its multi-attacks, and the guiding bolt is slightly under. We still have, by rules of moving up and down, a CR2 monster here. Cool, let's take a look at the notes and see what we have going on. Note number 1. Prior to raging, the best thing that can be done is to just keep spamming guiding bolt. Not only will it be doing a bunch of damage, but it'll also give advantage to the next attack on the players. Now, some notes that I've noticed for D&D earlier on, because I've been watching a whole bunch of other videos and people presenting videos on D&D, is that D&D unfortunately is an extremely offensive game. It really doesn't help being defensive, and you're losing out by being more defensive than offensive. So, if this is the case and the Orc Claw is with a bunch of other monsters, it's better off to just spam Guiding Bolt unless other spells or multi-attacks are needed. This will keep the Orc Claw safe, be able to get out all of its spell slots for Guiding Bolt, dealing damage, and only using other spells if it's absolutely necessary. Note number 2 is the half health rage. At this point, if the Orc Claw is under half health, it's best to shift this NPC from casting to melee if it survives that long. Note number 3 is its low HP. Because this Orc Claw only has 45 hit points on average, you can actually shift this Orc's Claw hit dice all the way up to 98 before it shifts into the next DCR rating, and this will give an average of 68 hit points without modifying the final combat rating of 2 whatsoever. So you can keep that in mind if you want to make these Orc Claws a little hardier than 45 hit points, giving them 68. I mean, a good couple hits from our players is really going to drop the hit points of this Orc Claw and put them into the rage zone pretty fast. And finally, is the CR balanced? Yes, we found the printed value and the values are balanced to give us a CR2 by rounding up and down. Now let's review. Our DCR is 1/4. This is a 1/4 for a printed monster of CR2. That's extremely low hit points. That means this monster isn't going to last long enough to be able to use most of its spells, and it's probably more beneficial just to spam that Guiding Bolt a bunch of times, because there's going to be a rogue or a ranged character or someone or another caster that's going to target this Orc Claw and just demolish it because of its low hit points and its low AC rating. So it's going to be an easy target to hit. Looking at the OCR 4, this is 2 steps over the printed value. And I say 4 because at half hit points, this Orc Claw is going to be doing a lot more damage. I mean, even at OCR 3 in the beginning, that's still higher than what is expected at a final combat rating of 2. So, yeah, our monster's balanced, but oh boy, is it really leaning into the offensive capabilities rather than the defensive capabilities. Thank you for joining me as we deconstructed the Orc Claw from D&D 5th edition. Check back next week as we deconstruct another monster into its barest parts and see what kind of ratings we can pull from this for the final printed value. Until next time, when we deconstruct another monster from D&D 5th edition, take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.